Hi, my name's Amber, I'm 29 and I've been skateboarding for 2 years. So I kind of got into skateboarding in a bit of an untraditional way. I've never been interested in skating ever. I followed Sky Brown for a few years, not that I wanted to be her, just that I found her very interesting and cool to follow, that this little tiny girl was just ripping. I guess Instagram's algorithm latched onto that and it ended up showing me more skate clips and then more and more because I was pausing on it for longer. So because I have bipolar, I'm quite impulsive and I basically took it as a sign to start skating. Initially I bought a longboard because I thought there's no way in hell I'm going to be at a skate park. I'm not going to be able to ride a normal skateboard. So I figured bigger, a bit more space, that will do. So I learned to push and cruise. I bought that for myself on my 27th birthday, pushed around for a month, got pretty bored, and then realised that I actually wanted to be around people. So I'm actually very socially awkward, but I find that I feel very comfortable in the skate community because I think a lot of us are quite socially awkward and you're just there focusing on yourself, but you're also around people, which I really liked, yeah. So that's kind of how I got into it. Initially I started going to skate parks just to make friends, but then I fell in love with it and I haven't looked back since, basically. So thank you, bipolar, for making me pick up a skateboard. I always kind of imagined skaters as teenage boys, teenage angst, kind of just rude or, people that outcasts in society. But through picking up skateboarding myself, it's been totally the opposite. I've discovered the most genuine, friendly people that I think I could have ever met through skating. And it was also so rad to see when I started skating, a ton of girls were getting into it. And it was just really nice to see, I had all this expectation of what skating would be, and it just wasn't that. It was completely the opposite, and in a good way. So when I first got diagnosed was pretty much when I first started skating. I think I got diagnosed in the May of 2021, and ever since I picked up a board, and it really helped me in especially the early stages. I wasn't on the right medication. I was manic probably about 75% of the time. My energy levels were beyond, so it gave me something to actually try and hone that energy into something. So obviously I was a beginner, I wanted to get better, so I would just practice an insane amount of time. I think if I didn't have skateboarding, I would have been off doing other things. So generally when people are manic, they're quite they lose their inhibitions, they spend a lot of money, you're more likely to take drugs, use substances basically. So I think that finding skateboarding at the right time really benefited me because it meant that I was channeling that manic energy into something positive. Yeah, I'm really lucky actually that I've not been manic in probably about a year because I've been through a huge process of med changes, and unfortunately with the mental health system it usually takes you to get to one end of the scale where you are really unwell and quite desperate, that they then take you seriously. And I was just basically so under-medicated for such a long time. So I was grateful to have skating when I was under-medicated because it meant that my mania could kind of help with learning stuff and just being out of the house. Whereas if I didn't have it, I'd probably be, a little bit mental inside the house. Yeah. But I mean, it doesn't really affect me a great deal. It probably actually makes me more efficient because basically your brain just thinks at about 1,000,000 miles an hour, so I can get ready in about 10 minutes, be out the door. Whereas now that I'm a little bit more level, it takes me a little bit longer. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people see mania as a very negative thing. So when you think manic, you think someone running around in the streets naked or just someone crazy. But it comes in a wide range. It's very much one end of the scale is low key, and then the other end of the scale is very severe. So I suffered from a lot of hypomanic episodes, which basically means you're just very on the ball and you want to go and you've got things that you want to do, but not necessarily dangerous things that you want to do. It's not a totally bad thing to go through. I think especially if you've lived with bipolar for a long time, it takes roughly about 10 years to get diagnosed. So I've had bipolar for a really long time, I just haven't known about it. So once I got the label, I could then look back at things and think, actually, like, that was probably because I was manic, but there's times you can use it to benefit you. So for me, when I first learnt to drop in, I was pretty manic. I dropped in, I had this goal in mind of Victoria Park skate park. I wanted to drop into that bowl. It took me about 40 minutes to commit, and once I did it, that just unlocks everything. And then I ended up on a bit of a manic episode. So from the beginning of the week, I dropped in on 5 foot. By the end of the week, I was dropping in at 8 foot. It does work to benefit you, definitely. It's quite common that you won't just have one mental illness or mental health problem. So for me, I had a whole host. Luckily, there's some things that I don't struggle with as much anymore, but I was, obviously with the highs comes the lows. So that's difficult, because you know you need to be out of the house to like see people, make yourself feel better, which is sometimes I used to force myself to go out and skate just to get out of that mindset. Otherwise, if you're at home, it's just really difficult to like get out of the cycle. The thing that I struggle with the most is probably people around me not understanding, because obviously it's a personality disorder. So quite often my personality is completely out of my hands, and I think a lot of people think, you know, mental health, oh, you must be able to control it. It's not that's not an excuse, but actually it is an excuse, because my thought processing gets completely confused. I'm not myself basically in that period, and I've been very lucky to have a lot of friends who understand that. They step back and they analyse what normal Amber is, and when they need to step in and say something, or when they don't need to step in and say something. Personally, I prefer it when people don't, because it just makes me feel really abnormal. So I guess in the sense that if someone had lung disease, you wouldn't expect them to run a marathon. But, you know, when it comes to bipolar, your behaviour is often totally out of your control, but then people expect you to act normal. But it's just not in my control. So yeah, our brains are just like different, like, and it's taken me a while to like acknowledge that there's not really much I can do about it sometimes. So it's just patience basically from those around you. Yeah, so I think the biggest struggle I've had has been probably my anxiety. So I go through phases of it being really bad, and then not so bad, and then it comes back, and then basically me and my doctors have had like lots of changes of meds to see what works, what doesn't work. Sometimes a medication that works for normal people with anxiety actually can make me worse, because there's just a massive chemical imbalance in my brain. So it's a case of just like tiptoeing with drugs, then deciding yes or no, and then trying another drug. But yeah, it really did affect me skating, because, you know, one week I'm feeling okay, and then, you know, another week I'll be feeling super anxious. I won't want to drop in what I know I can drop into, or, you know, and I think the mind is probably like the worst thing when it comes to skateboarding, because the minute you second guess yourself, you're likely to fall. So that's been something I've been struggling with throughout. But actually, I have a really interesting way that I managed to combat it. So when I first started and I was really anxious, I basically created this character in my head that like wasn't me, it was someone else. So she was called Send It Am. She just didn't think, was brave, would just go for it, and would try things even if they were scared. And I would just basically switch off me and become her, or pretend to be her. And then eventually, as time went on, I realised that that's not someone else, that actually is me. So that's been like really helpful for me. I mean, I can't give total credit for it. It was one of my first skate coaches as well helped me come up with that, and it just really helped, because I didn't have any self-confidence, and it just meant that I could then go for it and not be me, and use skating to kind of like become braver in myself. There's a tendency within sports to have the token disabled people involved, and I think that is something that needs to change, because people with disabilities are people, so we want to get everyone involved, whether you're old, young, disabled, able-bodied, like everyone should be able to experience it. And yeah, I think like having more of a positive attitude towards skating in general will then help bring the inclusivity in as well. Like personally, I find WCMX really interesting. It's like people who sit in a wheelchair and they do like BMX basically, and I think it's amazing. Like I've seen some amazing people do some like crazy stuff that I'm like, whoa. I've met someone that's done a backflip in a wheelchair. I just think it's great, and I think that specifically that community needs to grow, and it would be really rad to see more people who aren't able-bodied get involved with action sports, because there's so many things you can do. And I mean, technically bipolar is a disability, it's an invisible disability. There's lots of people that probably you encounter that do have a disability might not want to talk about it so openly, but I think that's something that we need to break down as a society as well as in the skate community. Like, use your disability to help inspire people who might have a similar disability, or people with different types of people basically to get involved. So I think it's just a case of us being a little bit more open, talking a little bit more vulnerably, talking a little bit more vulnerably, and just trying to inspire anyone and everyone to get on a board, just give action sports a go. I like to talk about it openly just because I think that there's such a big stigma, especially to mental illness. I think things like depression and anxiety have been, sort of accepted in general life now. Everyone struggles with mental health, that's pretty normal, but mental illness is a completely different kettle of fish. And even when I got diagnosed, like my parents had a really hard time, coming to terms with it. Whereas I was like, I read all the symptoms. I've been experiencing like a really hard time for the last couple of years, and it felt kind of like refreshing to be able to put a name to it and realise that there's a reason for this. I feel, having people that don't necessarily look quote unquote crazy, it's important to basically put a face to a disease, and there isn't one type of face for bipolar. There's not one type of face for many mental illnesses. It could be your next door neighbour, or it could be your best friend. It's invisible, so I basically just want to talk about it as much as possible and just banish some of the stigma. So I don't see it as a hindrance, it's just part of my personality. So that's why I like to talk about it really openly, because then if you're around me, it gives you a better understanding about myself. I consider it as a disability for me because I'm quite severe on the spectrum, so it is debilitating, and every time I've had a very severe episode, it's totally derailed my life. And unfortunately, I've had like 4 pretty heavy ones in the last 2 years, which is quite a lot. It's just a case of like stepping back, having that reset mind, and just knowing that, okay, I might not be able to be like the best I want to be right now, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to get back to that. The most annoying thing for me with the connotation with bipolar is they think it's like bipolar like the weather, sunny and then rainy, but it's just not like that at all. There's no happy and sad. There's a vast range of emotions that come alongside bipolar. So some people have depression, some people have anger, some people have mania, some people it's a really wide spectrum. Some people might experience psychosis. That's a whole different ballgame. That's basically like detaching from reality. But for me, I take antipsychotics because it balances out my mood. It also helps me sleep at night. So there's loads of things that you could say, keep an eye out for if one of your friends is going through an episode. It will be like lack of sleep, not feeling like you need to eat, maybe highly enthusiastic or highly energetic, or just very much coming up with ideas, so like business ideas, or it could be to that extent, but it also could be to the extent of believing in that they've discovered a religion, or it's really, there's a wide range. I'm type 2. There's 4 types of bipolar. There is BPD, which is borderline personality disorder. There is cyclothymia, which is basically cycles that almost are organic or on a clock that go between depression and mania. There's also bipolar type 2, which is what I have, and it's periods of mania, hypomania, which is less intense manic episodes, and then depression. And then there's type 1, which is basically people that experience psychosis, people that detach from reality when they go through episodes, and they tend to get hospitalised when they go through an episode. So that's more on the severe end of the spectrum. It has really helped me. Being part of a community feels good. Like, to be able to have someone to message in the group and say, I'm going here, does anyone want to join me? I think especially in the early days I was very dependent on that actually. I've been in a few crews. The first crew I joined was the neighbourhood skate club, and that was perfect. When I first started skating there was a lot of beginner girls, so we all kind of like learnt together, which was great. And then the Take It Easy crew are just a bunch of shredders. They're mostly female, and I'm so inspired by them all the time. I love skating with them because they just give such good energy, and that's the kind of people that I want to be around and, you know, kind of like embody a little bit. The thing that like brings us together is that we all love skating, and it doesn't matter whether you want to be like Tony Hawk or whether you just want to push around on the board, that's fine, but having that support and like friendship through skating is just like the best feeling ever. I'm quite fortunate that I'm a pretty confident girl, but not every girl is like me. They find skate parks very intimidating. And also, not just girls, but marginalised genders, people from the LGBTQ plus community. I think for me, even though I'm not part of that community, I feel that it's quite unfair that a lot of girls' nights will have it in very tiny writing. And it's like, it just doesn't feel inclusive for those people. So there's been like new things that have started, like the new wave events, which are more orientated towards the queer community, which I think is amazing, and they need their space just as much as girls need a space too. So yes, stuff like that, and just having people that support you and have more of a positive attitude in skating. So like, I think we just need to stamp out that negative skate community, you know, aspect, and work towards more of a positive way of helping people get into skating and don't gatekeep it. Some people want to learn tricks, some people don't want to learn tricks, but we're all part of the same community. So I coach at Source Park in Hastings. I've been doing it since about November last year. Naturally, I've always coached the entire time I've skated. I think being a beginner helps you coach people because you have been in that position not that long ago and you can remember the steps, whereas someone who's been skating for 20 years might not remember the exact steps to drop in because it's so second nature. So I've always helped my friends or anyone who I see struggling. I tend to help a lot of people learn to drop in because I feel drop-ins are super confident for me, and I've got a pretty good technique for teaching people. Tend to have a lot of people lean back and stuff, so I try to say like nose over nose of skateboard, and that's like safe basically. So yeah, I've been coaching pretty much since I started skating, but officially since last year. It's really fun. It's done in quite a laid back way at Source, so we have the kids come in and we sort of float around and help them. And just watching the progression of some of those kids is just amazing, where they've gone from literally learning to step on a skateboard, push, kick turn, their first revert. And I've got a lot of kids that get so excited to show me what they've learnt that week. They're just like, Amber, watch this, I want to show you this. And it's just like really nice. It's definitely a different side to the skate community that I think some skaters really don't like. But for me, if you need a bit of extra support to get on a board, like, why not have lessons or, you know, coach people? So for me, I had a skate coach from the very beginning, and I don't think without a skate coach I would have continued to skate. So I am leaning more towards using my platform to educate people and just talk more openly about bipolar. although I've mentioned it before, previously, I want to do it more regularly. I've been given the opportunity to work with a few charities, to work regularly for creating content, talking on radio, talking on TV, just kind of like being a spokesperson for people with bipolar who are in their mid-20s. There's a lot of people who get diagnosed much later in life, so there's a real, not much, like, what's the word, like, representation. Yeah, there's not much representation when it comes to people in their 20s or early 30s that have bipolar, because it does take so long to get diagnosed. Also, I've been able to take coaching to the next level. I've managed to get my skateboard GB qualification, which was really fun. And me and a few girls down in Hastings are setting up events to get more women into skateboarding. It is a general inclusive safe space, so it's not just women. That's why we are WOMXN, which basically means anyone that isn't a man. To hold safe spaces for those people to learn to skate. So whether you're part of whether you're from the LGBTQ plus community, or whether you're trans, or whether you find that you struggle to find people that you can connect with, we want to be there for those people and start getting more of a community built in our local area. We find that there's a lot of girls that skate and there's a lot of older ladies that skate, but there's such a polar opposite, and there's not really a huge community over all ages, which is what you experience here in London. So for me, I want to build a community from the ground up, basically.